Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're having a great week. We are going to continue on our examination of advertising this week by focusing on uh, branding and sort of branding and identities. These two articles, and then the film, the Frontline special, The Persuaders, all are addressing the issue of advertising in contemporary society. These articles also provide a little bit of background in terms of historical development and ideas about branding going way back and sort of how it's kind of changed and shifted over the years with a big major change going on in post-World War II United States and sort of the world itself, sort of the global developed world. Let's just kind of talk about, so the goal here of this particular video is to give you some background on the article, some information, just provide a little bit more context, some detail, talk about the question for the week, and then that's basically it. So let's kind of get started. So the first article on the Twitchell article, Branding 101. I think one of the things that Twitchell is concerned about or focused on is sort of this distinction between the private and the public, and what happens when advertising becomes more and more in the public domain. So if you kind of pull back and look at things historically, if we go back to the 1800s, we can go back that far. Advertising, for all intents and purposes, did not exist. So we didn't have, there weren't brands around particular products. There wasn't advertising for the most part. There wasn't advertising in the marketplace. So the public, even in the public, advertising wasn't really a feature. That all the way up until probably early 1900s, we start to get really the development of advertising. And once we get the development of advertising, this sort of advertising comes out into the public. Into the marketplace, and that's probably an appropriate place for it, right? It's about providing information about goods or services, whatever it may be. What Twitchell is kind of interested in looking at and examining is, I guess, the extent to which that advertising's been engaged in the public, further and further into the public realm. So things that may have been off limits before that are becoming more and more associated with commercial space or advertising space. One I can think of is public schools. K through 12 public schools, or park and rec programs that have sponsorships, whether that's local business, and it kind of gets in these interesting things, local business versus big business. But they're being supported sometimes by sponsors, and these sponsors they're advertising towards a market, towards kids, for example. I remember years ago I was coaching the kids' basketball teams. In the beginning of the year, going to the coaches' meeting, they had these calendars that they wanted the coaches to hand out to all the players, and the calendars were what I saw just it's an advertisement for Gatorade, and I told our son, I said, I'm not going to hand these out. I just don't think it's necessary to hand them out. I just don't think, kids are here to play basketball and to have promotional sort of things for Gatorade. It just seemed like it just wasn't, for me, appropriate. But that's that idea that things have become more and more advertising more and more into the public space and more into the private space. So it's harder to make that distinction between the private and the public. Where private would be, one's home, one's car, these kind of things, that more and more stuff, more and more advertising is not only further infiltrating or moving into the public, it's, well throughout the public, but also increasingly, in the private as well. So that's one thing. Twitchell does not talk a lot about that, but that's like one kind of issue that Twitchell's addressing. The other thing to think about, with Twitchell's article as well as Barber's article on branded identities, is the idea about branding and storytelling, and that part of culture is storytelling. It's the stories that we tell. You'll get this a little bit later on in another article examining stories within the mass media, stories that are being told within television. But all cultures tell stories, right? I mean, mythologies, ancient mythologies, they're storytelling at its best. So culture, from a functionalist viewpoint, right? Stories are important. They reflect the values of a culture. They help create solidarity or a sense of belonging and connection to a culture. So storytelling is an important feature of culture itself. One of the concerns is that when storytelling, in the past, it came more from the community itself. The story, communities were much smaller, maybe more homogenous or more similar in terms of background and experience. And stories that were told were coming from the community itself and coming from the community and being told and retold throughout the community. One of the things as we move into sort of a mass consumption society, post World War II, is that our stories start to become more the stories that are coming from the commercial side. That storytelling is corporate storytelling, um, telling stories about products, ideas, and we start to surround ourselves by all these different stories that go on within a product, right? Um, Apple is a great sort of an example of being able to tell a great story. Stories of its product and loyal customers. I mean, and then they have, they do. There are different features between Apple products and PC products. But I think the idea is that we're buying more than just sort of the features of one versus the other. It becomes part of our identity, like who we are. Like we actually, through the stories of a particular product, an idea, we're buying these stories. We want that meaning, right? We want the meaning for in the product, but also in our own lives. And this is kind of hard to kind of get at with both Twitchell and Barber, but they're really kind of talking about is after industrialization, the rise of romanticism, we're getting sort of new ideas about products. No longer is a product only a functional value, a use value. It's also now increasingly have we envision, we want products to mean certain things, and they're given meaning by companies and corporations. I thought it was a pretty cool quote on page 101 in Twitchell. Says that looking at retail space, it's a little bit different of a topic, but looking at retail space within a grocery store, the growth and development of retail space, you could say almost any store, right? It's not because there are more products, but because there are more nearly redundant products. So you need to have more things on the shelf. You need to have more shelf space, not because there are actually more products, but because there's more competition. There's more products that are nearly redundant. It's basically a repetition of the same thing. It's just something to kind of, consider. We have an explosion of products compared to, pre-1950s. And what differentiates one product versus another is sometimes the stories that are being told by that product. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to get you or me to grab one product off the shelf versus another one. There are differences between products, but the question becomes one: how much of it is really are we buying because we understand and we research the difference, we want that difference, and how much of it is we're buying something because of the story it's being told about it, or it's a part of our identity. So the question that I want you, or the thing I want you to do for the assignment for this week, in addition to the write-ups of the articles and the Frontline special, so I want you to go to a grocery store, in a big grocery store, a big chain, with the exception of Trader Joe's, and I'll mention this why in a minute, and go to a Safeway, Walmart, Kroger, these are sort of big stores, right? And go and if you can choose one or the other, is go to the toothpaste section, since we did something on teeth a while ago, and count how many products, even if let's say it's Colgate. Colgate has, products for A, B, C, and D. It's like, for sensitive teeth or for white teeth. It's like they have multiple products, right? So I want you to count the number of different products. First of all, number of different brands that you see. So you could have a Kroger brand, you have Crest, you have Colgate, So identify the number of brands, and then under each brand, list the number of different products that are on the shelf. Okay, so you either choose toothpaste or should go to the cereal aisle and just count the number of different items in this case. There's a lot of items of cereal. It would take a long time just to sit there and go through, okay, here's the product, here's everything underneath the product. For the cereal, just go down the aisle and count how many different brands of cereal, or how many different types of brands of cereal that you see, not being worried about the company. Okay, and then I want you to sort of reflect on that. So like, how does that sort of, after you count that up, it's like, okay, what do you make of that? What is the value of sort of all those different products? After these readings, how do you sort of maybe critique that in terms of the number of products that are going on there? So just some of your observations about that. There's no one right or wrong answer, but just kind of curious, some of your thoughts and observations about products that either toothpaste or cereal. And the reason I said, not to go to Trader Joe's is because Trader Joe's, its model, if you think about it, its model is simple, right? I mean, they have a small footprint relatively small in terms of floor design. And you don't have choices. I mean, you have one kind of peanut butter. I mean, it's Trader Joe's peanut butter, right? You have dishwasher soap. There's one dishwasher soap. It's Trader Joe's. And one of the reasons it's one of the reasons I like to go to Trader Joe's. For me personally, it's just, I don't need to have 7 different choices for dishwashing soap. It's like, it's just sort of, it's overwhelming sometimes the number of choices that we do have. I remember going to Spain years ago, and in Spain going to get something to drink, and looked inside the little refrigerator at a store, and it had 2 different types of Gatorade. One was orange, and one was the classic lemon lime. That was it. It wasn't different sizes of bottles, shapes. This was probably about 10, 15 years ago. It's probably changed somewhat. But you look at the Powerades and sports drinks, and you go to the section, you just go, wow, man, there's bottle sizes and shapes and flavors and this, that, and the other. How much difference is there? There is some, but it's this product differentiation and being able to sort of differentiate between all those different products. And then sort of as a last note, on Barber's article, The Branded Identities and the Loss of Meaning, Barber's pretty critical, he uses the words such as, it's created an infantilist ethos. It's that our identities is this sort of mass consumption, late consumption culture that we live in. It's removing our humanity. And I'd say that Barber would say it's not just changing our humanity based on stories that are being circulated now within culture that are wrapped around products and marketing. But I would say that Barber sees that it's really been an assault on our own agency. Our identities in the past came from the community. It was more local. In some ways, Barber would probably say is more honest. And now, it's a different world, right? It's just sort of a different world. We're seeking authenticity, trying to, discover self, sort of this idea of humanity and this sort of mass consumption sort of society itself. So some of the articles are pretty critical, and I think it's appropriate sometimes to be critical and sort of examines these things about, advertising or film, whatever it may be in popular culture, and raise questions, because the stories in the past, just sort of a real quick thing, the stories in the past came from the community. Well, what happens when stories are increasingly being told from big corporations, So those stories doesn't make them wrong, but they're motivated by different outcomes, right? So stories in the past may have been motivated more by that functionalist idea of communicating values, assuring some sort of regulation or stability within society. And now if stories are being told from the commercial side more, it's motivated by profit, right? And so this is very devaluing in some ways to our own identities and to our own communities. Okay, so here's sort of give you an example, kind of end with this. I was thinking about just what can I provide as an example of some of this stuff. So I was in Cuba, went with a friend maybe like 5 years ago, and I bought this hat when I was in Cuba. Okay, so here it is. It's just there's no. You can see there's no logo on it. There's no brand. There's no logo, and these were fairly common, right? So these are just locally made straw hat. I bought one. Went to Spain again this past year, and I bought one in Spain. There's no identification of where it came from. It's simple, easy. I didn't buy this because I had 7 different choices between hats. It was like there's the one kind of hat, right? And there's a hat. It's functional. You don't even think about it, right? I just sort of bought that hat. I like this hat too. I bought this hat. This hat, it's different. I mean, it's a comfortable hat. I bought it up in Portland. A company, it's called Gorin Brothers Hat Company. They're probably an international hat company. They make cool hats. Branding is kind of key here. Branding about, sort of the branding about hats. They're trying to differentiate themselves in the market. They had a product, so Breaking Bad, in the TV series Breaking Bad, the main character, wears a Gorin hat. I mean, this is sort of genius from Gorin Company, is to get a character on a show, a popular show, and have that character wear one of their hats. What greater advertising than that, right? So I'm not saying I bought this because I wanted to be the person in Breaking Bad, but I just want to sort of point out sort of that difference. You're thinking about where you're reading Twitchell and Barber's article, and they're talking about in the past, in a less developed society, and a society that doesn't have as many products, things just had a functional value. You bought something, you bought a shirt, you just needed a button-down shirt to go to work, whatever it may be. There wasn't a lot of different choices there, and there weren't ways of differentiating between those different things. It's just locally made, or if it was made from outside the area, it wasn't branded the same way. Now we get all kinds of different products. We have explosion of products, and products they have to differentiate themselves between other competing products that are out there, and they do that through creating a brand, right? And the story they tell about their particular brand, and that story becomes really powerful. So hopefully that helps just kind of give you a little bit of background and context. Hope you enjoy the readings. They're powerful. I can't say that enough. I mean, advertising, it's our day-to-day life stuff. We see it all around us, but yet sometimes we don't step back and sort of ask questions about it and examine it. So hopefully these readings last week and this week, as well as the Frontline Special, the Persuaders for this week, hopefully those just add your information and perspective, and that you enjoy those. All right, have a great day. Have a great week. Take care.